With the Combine and Pro Days in the rearview mirror, the Seahawks are tying up their pre-draft evaluation process, bringing in a number of prospects for official visits. Which players have come to the VMAC so far, and are these days a big deal or not? We're going to be diving in on our latest installment of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening in Poland or nearby Pullman. We greatly appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We've got a special Wednesday episode coming your way. We're going to continue our draft coverage with my favorite position, running backs. We'll be looking at a couple of first-round prospects, day 2 picks, and a few gems on day 3. And we'll be tackling your questions in our weekly mailbag segment as well. Make sure to check out Locked On's brand new NFL Draft newsletter. Luke Inman is doing an amazing job putting that together. Check that resource out at lockedonpodcast.com/newsletters to sign up for your free NFL Draft newsletter. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. With 3 weeks remaining until the 2023 NFL Draft, the Seahawks are in the midst of their top 30 visits. 30 visits with players coming to the VMAC for medicals, interviews with coaches, and other things of that nature. And these have been important visits for the Seahawks in recent years. Last year, Derek Young and Boye Mafe both made top 30 visits and were eventually selected by the Seahawks. Frank Clark is another player back in the day that had a top 30 visit in the pre-draft process, and the Seahawks ended up selecting him. So, Rob, this might not be a major indicator. It's just a small piece of the pre-draft puzzle, and yet, at the same time, we should be paying close attention to the names that are going to the VMAC right now, because Seattle does have a track record of picking some of those players.
Oh, sure. Darrell Taylor being another one, and so I mentioned him because for those of you who are watching on YouTube, and thank you for those of you again watching and all of you listening as well. But you might see a picture of Byron Young, another former Tennessee Volunteer edge rusher. And so I would 100% agree with you, Corbin, that this is important information to look at, to look at these names, and because Seattle does have a track record, and this is obviously a critical time of year with the draft only a couple of weeks away. If you are going to dedicate time to talking to a player, then clearly the team has some interest in that player. Quickly, I'll just read off the names of the 8 visits that have been reported so far. They'd be the offensive tackle Juwan Jones from Ohio State, Jamie Robinson, the safety from Florida State, Braden Daniels, offensive lineman, versatile offensive lineman from Utah, Jordan Howden, defensive back from Minnesota, Jarek Reed, the second safety from New Mexico, Jordan McFadden, offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman from Clemson, Anthony Bradford, a guard from LSU, and Byron Young. Before I mentioned Byron Young, the edge rusher from Tennessee. Again, I think that it's important for fans to recognize just the importance, frankly, of these top 30 visits. Because, again, it's just allowing teams one more opportunity to kind of just dot the I and cross the T's and to understand these players, but not just the individual players themselves. I think this is opportunities. Certainly the teams are going to be asking these players about some of their teammates, some of the opponents that they faced. In the case of, say, Jarek Reed, the safety from New Mexico, who's got great ball skills. He's got an interception on tape, Corbin, of a one-arm interception. Basically looks like a center fielder. Just making a catch of the ball way extended over his shoulder. That's just a beautiful play. He wasn't invited to the combine. I mean, those are the types of players that you want to get to know a little bit more. The fact that there's 3 interior offensive linemen of very different styles and shapes, I think is very interesting here as well. So again, I think that this is a interesting collection of players, and one that Seahawks fans should be paying close attention to.
I'm glad that you mentioned the opportunity here to meet with players that are under the radar, because One question that at least I get this question frequently on social media, and in fact, I think I've answered it in a few mailbag segments before, but a lot of times fans wonder, why aren't there big names on these top 30 lists? Like, why aren't we bringing Jalen Carter in? Or why are we not bringing in Will Anderson Jr.? And maybe one of those players did come out for a top 30. That's the other thing worth noting. These are just the reported ones. And every year we don't get all 30. Like, that information does not become revealed. But usually you get a decent chunk of the players that are going to be coming out. And sometimes you can find it on Instagram. That's how people found out about Boye Mafe going to Seattle last year for a top 30 visit. But the point is, a lot of times those top 10 selections or top 15 selection caliber players, teams have already done their homework on those guys. They've had a chance to talk to them at the combine, or they've talked to them at the Senior Bowl, or they have had a chance to speak with them at their pro day. They've usually had their exposure to those players. This provides an opportunity for your day 2, your day 3, your priority undrafted free agent guys to bring them in and get to know those players better. Somebody like a Jarek Reed or a Jordan Howden from Minnesota, who I'm a big fan, watching some Minnesota tape. And Pete Carroll loves bringing in players that have played for PJ Fleck. We saw D. Eskridge, who played 1 year at Western Michigan under Fleck before he went to Minnesota. They drafted him in the second round. Boye Mafe last year. I mean, they like players from that program, and they like those row the boat players. So I could see Jordan Howden being a guy late day 3, maybe even as a priority free agent, that they would have a lot of interest bringing in to compete at safety. He's played some corner as well, a really good special teams player. So that would make some sense. And then you mentioned the interior offensive line. That's probably what I'm most fascinated by looking at this list, because you mentioned all 3 of these players have different skill sets. The one in particular that I'm really interested, though, in is Braden Daniels from Utah. He played tackle for the Utes and was an outstanding pass protector, one of the best pass protecting tackles in college football this past season. But he has started a few games earlier in his college career at guard, and you look at his size, he's barely over 300 pounds, doesn't have long arms. I don't see him projecting as a tackle at the next level. He believes he should play tackle, and there may be some teams that see the fit there. But I think in Seattle, especially with the investments they made last year, he would be competing with Phil Haynes at right guard right away to start with that pass protection ability, good athleticism, a guy that can on the move, zone block really well. He would be a very strong fit here if you can coach him up with more experience at the guard spot. And then you've got Anthony Bradford on the other end of the spectrum, who's a 336-pound mauler, who's at his best when he can just fire out of his stance and just bully people. That really seemed like guard Seattle. They picked another 330-pound guard from LSU just a few years ago in Damian Lewis. So maybe they're still looking at those bigger-bodied interior guys at the guard position to try to set the tone along the line of scrimmage. So Bradford's another player that would certainly help from that aspect, even if he is not the athlete that Braden Daniels presents at the guard position. So I'm really intrigued by the offensive lineman they brought in. And of course, DeJuan Jones coming in created quite a stir, because some think he's a first-round prospect at the tackle position, and Seattle picked 2 tackles last year. So that creates a little bit of a dynamic. Maybe that's one of those where they're asking him about teammates like Luke Whippler, who he played with along the offensive line. But any way you slice it, this is really an opportunity, that last chance to really look at certain prospects that maybe you haven't had a chance to do as much digging on, maybe get some information on teammates or opponents, as you mentioned. These are really critical, and the Seahawks have drafted a decent number of players who have had these top 30 visits. So I would not completely dismiss these. Those don't matter. They have picked a lot of guys that have made these trips.
They absolutely have. And then one other thing, you talked before about, why don't the Seahawks have more of the big name players come and visit? I think there's 2 things there that you touched upon, the idea that just the reality of the fact that Seattle and every other NFL team has already done a lot of the evaluating of these players already. They've met with every single player, whether it be on the road previously at their own schools or at the All-Star games with the combines. They're doing some extra digging on some players. The other thing is just the reality of the geographic location of Seattle. And a lot of these players are under high demand. There's only another 3 weeks to go towards the draft, as you mentioned before. And so you can't physically be moving from, Denver to LA to Philadelphia to Seattle to, to Dallas, the way that NFL teams might wish that they could move these players right now. And so there's just the reality of that. And the players and the agents will, I think that Seattle maybe gets the short end of the stick in that way. And that there might be a lot of Zoom calls where they're going to have to try to meet players in that regard, but not be able to have those official visits. Because that's just, again, the geographic reality of where Seattle is located. As Pete Carroll talked about here, or kind of joked about here recently.
have you looked at a map?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you looked at a map, and so that to me, I think is something that we have to consider here too. And then again, I think that this kind of speaks to the fact that Seattle has had really pretty darn remarkable success in the late rounds and undrafted free agency. And I think a lot of that is because they do dig deeper into just what matters with these young players. You have so many guys, and so many of them have very similar athletic traits and all that kind of stuff. It really comes down to who has the heart, who has the toughness, who wants to be great. And I think that's where these interviews are really are an important factor in that.
It's all about evaluating character. And John Schneider, especially since the Malik McDowell situation, that has become an even more heightened part of their process. And so we know some of the things that have happened, like staring contests. That is a part of the equation for the Seahawks in this. And that might be viewed as weird, but they have certain things that they do to try to assess the character of the players that they're looking at, because that really does make a difference. Coming up next, we're going to tackle your questions on our weekly mailbag segment here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and three-pointers drained. I'm a huge fan of player prop parlays, and you can make bets such as Fred VanVleet of the Raptors scoring 20 or more points at plus 100. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. You're listening to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad as always to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. As we've been doing the last couple weeks, Wednesdays become the sweet spot for our mailbag segment. And we got tons of good questions from you, our valued listeners. So let's get to it. Our first question, Rob, for you, coming from Josh Edwards on Twitter. If the Seahawks end up trading back, who do you think our trade targets are, and who would we pick with their draft pick? So Josh is asking which teams behind the Seahawks might be the ideal ones to trade up, or might be the most motivated to move up to number 5, and what type of players might the Seahawks be looking at if they move down?
Well, I think that, in the most cases, if a team is looking to trade up, they're usually looking to trade up for a quarterback. And so I think that you'd have to look at those clubs like the Las Vegas Raiders at 7, Tennessee Titans at 11. Those are the clubs that immediately jump to my mind. There's been some talk now about the New England Patriots, and maybe they have some issues with Mac Jones. Maybe they could jump into the mix. Obviously, if the Baltimore Ravens do something with Lamar Jackson, perhaps they might be looking for a quarterback. There are some moving targets in that regard. But as far as the players, I have a hard time imagining a scenario in which Seattle gets the collection of picks that is going to warrant them moving down much further than, say, 11 at Tennessee. And so to me, there's kind of a sweet spot of 3 or 4 or 5 players there that I think would make some sense. We've talked about Lucas Van Ness before from Iowa. To me, he's a player that I think makes a lot of sense because of his size, his physicality, his upside. Besides the basically consensus 6 that we've talked about in the past, as far as the quarterbacks, and then again, Tyree Wilson, Jalen Carter, and Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama, of course. So to me, again, Lucas Van Ness would be one. I hate to say it, but for me, The running back, Bijan Robinson from Texas, would be an absolute candidate if I'm moving down at that spot. I would not be looking necessarily at the cornerbacks, which a lot of people would be thinking at that spot. I recognize that they are, they're probably the players that should be going next. So that's why I might be even looking to trade down a second time and see if I can kind of parlay that move. So because to me, that's really the talent that you're looking at. And then again, if you fall in love with one of those wide receivers, Jackson Smith and Jigba has been kind of, projected by a lot of people in that kind of spot. But that Lucas Van Ness to me is one of the players that I would be focusing on if I was to have a small trade down.
That second tier of players, certainly Lucas Van Ness could be there. Maybe the corners, you maybe aren't on board with that, but certainly if one of those top corners available there, maybe Seattle considers making a move that goes against what they've done in the past and investing an early pick there, the receiver position as well. There's a lot of options. Chase Riddell tweets, who benefits the most from Ryan Neal leaving, and how much does that alter odds of drafting a safety? So first, as far as who benefits from this, well, Julian Love being the new addition, he now doesn't have to worry about splitting any snaps with Ryan Neal on the field. He's going to be that third safety. He's going to be potentially the nickel corner. So he's going to be the one that gains the most from that, playing alongside a healthy Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. I would also mention that Joey Blunt is somebody else that benefits from this, because now he takes residency as that number 4 safety on the roster. And he's a guy that has played a little bit in the box before, but generally he is a deep third safety, 2 deep safety. He's a coverage-free safety. So this provides an opportunity for him to potentially get some snaps on defense when they are in those bandit packages where they're playing 7 defensive backs. So he would be somebody that would certainly benefit. As far as whether this alters odds for drafting a safety, I think that the Seahawks all along, that has been something that is a strong possibility. Fans might not realize it, but you've got to have insurance policies for if Jamal Adams is not the same player or has more injuries, because they could very easily move on next offseason, and Quandre Diggs isn't getting any younger. So now with Ryan Neal being out, that has just further magnified the long-term status of this position. So I absolutely think that safety is on the board, maybe even as early as day 2 for the Seahawks to add a player at that position. Ryan Neal's departure probably exacerbates that problem, but I think that all along it's been a position that was under the radar, a need for the Seahawks beyond 2023. Next question for Rob, coming from Jeff Putnam. If we assume the Seahawks don't want Carter and Richardson is gone and Anderson is gone, who do you think would be the best pick at number 5 based on current needs? So they don't want Carter, Richardson's gone, Anderson's gone. Who's the best fit at number 5 at that point for the Seahawks?
I think we're probably talking Tyree Wilson at that point. And I've argued for Tyree Wilson a lot in the past. I mean, this is a guy who just is such a hulking presence, and he has such upside to him that you get excited about. I mean, he's 6'5", 275 pounds. He's got the wingspan of legitimate NFL or NBA center. And his ability just to kind of collapse the pocket as a power guy and yet still have really nice agility as a big man. He has the ability to come in and play the defensive line as well as be that stand-up edge rusher, the rush linebacker, and that positional versatility to me is just really intriguing. And I mentioned Lucas Van Ness a moment ago. I just think that those are going to be the players that Seattle might be targeting, because I think that the rest of the draft lines up a little bit better if you're able to address that need for another big guy along the defensive line first, and then be able to kind of address the rest of your needs moving forward. If Seattle gets cute, if they go with the quarterback early on, then they're gambling with what kind of defensive player, what kind of impact defensive player they might be able to get along the defensive line later in the draft.
That's the obvious trade-off. If you're going to be drafting Anthony Richardson, you are negating the opportunity to get one of those blue chip defensive players that still likely will be there at pick number 5. Danny tweets, with the salary cap at like $3 million right now, do the Seahawks have to make a move or two before the draft, or do they have until, I don't know, closer to the start of the season? So a lot of fans have been asking me questions about this, and some have actually been defying my articles that have been saying that the Seahawks need to get salary cap compliant. And
how dare they?
You're partially right to the extent that they don't need to do it right this minute. Like John Schneider, this is not like the TV show 24, and John Schneider is on a lifeline right now, and we got to get cap compliant. Like, it's not that bad, but You are better off addressing this situation here in the next few weeks so that you have more flexibility to add some of those veteran free agents that you still want to add. Maybe that's bringing back an Al Woods or a Shelby Harris or bringing back Puna Ford or some other outside free agent. You got to be able to take care of those moves, because if you let this just wait, linger on, you're going to get into a position where you have to make some really prompt moves in May when you're starting to sign your rookie class. And so they need to be cognizant of that. So again, it's not a situation where John Schneider's, you're on the clock, you got 5 minutes, go get an extension with Uchenna Nwosu. Like, two sides got to dance on that. The players got to agree to it too. Those things don't happen overnight. So I want to make sure fans understand that. I'm not saying they need to get cap compliant here in the next 10 minutes, but it would behoove them to get a move or two done here, at least during the draft, whether that's trading Noah Fant or whatever else they choose to do. But it would behoove them to get that salary cap situation, get your ducks in a row now rather than wait and then have to try to make a bunch of moves in quick order, because that's when teams tend to make mistakes, when you get put into rush situations like that. Jeremy tweets, who's the biggest sleeper from this free agent signing class for the Seahawks? So, Rob, there's been 6 outside free agents added. I mean, we can consider Bobby Wagner an outside free agent, even though he really just was taking up residence in L.A. as a renter last year.
And it's funny, and that's the reason why I'm going to go with my answer of Jarran Reed, is because everybody is going to focus on the reunification of Bobby Wagner and the Seahawks, and as well they should. I mean, you're talking about a Hall of Famer and and all of that, and obviously at a position of concern for Seattle. But I think Jarran Reed, I've mentioned this term or this expression before, the junkyard dog. I really think that it's important that Seattle reestablishes themselves along the defensive line as being true tough guys. And I mean that no disrespect towards Al Woods or Shelby Harris or Quentin Jefferson, because to me, those are tough guys. You talked about before, Corbin, how, it should be John Schneider, or he's known as John Schneider, but maybe it should be Jack Bauer. Again, the 24 reference there, because maybe he should be working overtime or, against the clock right now to try to get some of those big defensive linemen back. To me, Jarran Reed brings that. Draymond Jones brings that as well. They bring that toughness, that physicality that Seattle needs to have if they're going to improve a run defense that was just abysmal last season. And so I think that Reed is, of course, well known by the Seahawks, but I don't know that there's a lot of Seahawks fans out there. Certainly the ones who listen to our program would recognize Jarran Reed's impact on this club and its success in the past, but there may be a lot of fans out there who don't. And I think that, again, he's not going to put up a bunch of statistics. I mean, you looked last year, I don't think he had a single sack, but he brings an element of toughness that, again, I think the Seattle is lacked. It needs, and again, size, physicality against the run, I think is going to be helpful in that regard. And I think that no one is really going to talk. They're going to give him kind of passing acknowledgement. And I don't even know that he necessarily is going to be a starter, considering, because I think the Seattle, again, is going to be looking to address the defensive line in this draft. But with knowing that Wagner is going to get a bunch of attention, knowing that Brown could be, obviously starting center, knowing all the attention that Love now is going to have, fairly or not, with Ryan Neal moving on. And then, again, to me, that is why that the Jarran Reed might actually be the most underrated of Seattle's free agent class so far.
Certainly an overlooked return, and maybe because last year wasn't a great year for him in Green Bay and he's now 30, some fans might be thinking, well, what else is left in the tank? But the Seahawks clearly believe that they can get him back to playing at a high level with the 2-year contract that they gave him. Reyes tweets, should the Seahawks cut D. Eskridge to make room for a third receiver? There's really no point in releasing D. Eskridge. You're going to only save $800,000 doing that. That doesn't solve your salary cap crisis. I mean, obviously, if you make a couple other moves, maybe that puts you back in the black, but I don't think the Seahawks are ready to give up on D. Eskridge yet, because really the biggest issue for him has been health, and he just hasn't been able to stay on the field long enough to really get in a rhythm. They still believe that if he can stay healthy, that's now a big if, but if he can stay healthy, he can still potentially be the number 3 receiver. So Pete Carroll, John Schneider, they're not ready to turn the page yet on that draft pick that so far has been a failure. They are hoping in year 3 that Eskridge can turn it around. And this is not a first-round pick where you're going to be saving multiple $1 million by jettisoning him. You're not going to be saving much money, so it doesn't make any sense. We're going to get to running backs here in the draft. This is a very good running back class. We're going to be discussing a couple of possible first-round picks, day 2 selections, and day 3 gems. We'll be getting to that here in a moment. We appreciate you making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. And for your second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with the draft dudes from free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more. Join NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino as they take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise. Every Monday through Friday, find Locked On NFL Scouting with the draft dudes wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, let's talk running backs. My favorite free draft segment every year. Former running back coach and me gets super excited about it. And I'll admit, I'm still pretty old school. I see a lot of value in running backs where most people really don't. So, or they have a different viewpoint on what value is at the running back position, which certainly I can acknowledge that importance with the way the game has changed. But we're going to talk some first rounders, and this is normally a discussion that draws a lot of ire from fans, not just in the Seahawks fan base, but just NFL fans in general, because no, you can't draft a running back in the first round. But this class has at least one, maybe 2 guys that you could justify making a first round pick. And the one that we know obviously is going to get that nod is going to be Bijan Robinson. The real question is, where does he end up getting drafted? Because from a pure talent standpoint, I think you would agree with me on this. I think he's a top 10 talent in this draft class in terms of total skill. This is as close to a flawless running back prospect as you are going to find. He's over 230 pounds. He runs super fast. I know the 40 time maybe didn't showcase he runs a 4.3, but this is a guy that can still hit home runs. He averaged 4.17 yards per carry after contact. That was second in the country last year among running backs. 104 missed tackles. That was the first number 1 in the entire country. And oh, by the way, he averaged 16.5 yards per reception as a receiver last year. This guy can do it all. Maybe the one nitpicking thing that you can say is his pass protection can be inconsistent at times, and he's not bad at it. So this is a player that can do it all. And even in today's NFL, that could maybe justify a top 10, top 15 selection, because this guy is that good and that impactful of a game changer.
And I'll just quickly transition over here to the other quote unquote other back that I think is going to get first round consideration, at least from some clubs, and perhaps even Seattle at number 20, because he is a dynamic playmaker. But he is more of an air back. This is not a big bulky guy. Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama is basically 200-pounder. But he is like Ken Walker III in that he can just make you miss in very tight quarters. He has great hands. He led Alabama in rushing yards and receptions a year ago. I mean, when's the last time you say that about somebody? So, again, absolutely dynamic. He reminds me of Alvin Kamara. And that, again, is a dynamic player. So I think that he is going to be drafted, if not in the first round, then the early second, because, again, his game translates so beautifully to today's NFL.
It seems like his sweet spot might be around where the Seahawks picked Ken Walker III last year, in the late 30s, early 40s. But a team could trade up to the end of the first round to ensure that they get him. And I think he is running back number 2. But as I've said several times over the past couple months, this draft is loaded at running back. So if you don't get one of those first 2 guys, don't fret. There's still plenty of talent for you to choose from on day 2. True. Tyjae Spears from Tulane headlines my list of guys in tier 2. And another player you'll notice in this draft class, Rob, there's not a lot of the bigger backs. There's not a lot of your 215, 220 plus pound runners. There's a lot of the 195 to 205 pound variety, but there's still guys that can break tackles. They're slippery. Tyjae Spears averaged 6.1 yards per run last year for Tulane. And this is a guy that also averaged 11 yards per catch, forced 17 missed tackles as a receiver. He's a respectable pass protector. This is a guy that if you watch the bowl game, the Cotton Bowl game against USC, he had a dominant performance against one of the top teams in the country. And so he showed up in the big games, put Tulane on the map. This is not a school known for its football, and yet he turned them into a 11-game winner last year, a big part of that. And you saw what he did at the Senior Bowl. I think his 3-down capabilities, pass catching, pass protecting, his running ability, the ability to hit home runs, this is a guy on day 2 that makes a lot of sense to complement Ken Walker III.
If you want a guy who hits home runs, then the guy I'm going to talk about, Devon Achane from Texas A&M, is really the big play threat in this draft, in my opinion, as far as the running backs, or at least of the tier that I'm going to be talking about here. Now, again, you talked about kind of these diminutive backs, 5'9", 188 pounds. I mean, he is very, very slight. But at the same time, I'm talking about world-class speed, 4.32 second 40-yard dash time at the combine. And this is a guy that in his last game, I mean, Texas A&M had a really down season this year, Corbin, and they did not qualify for a bowl game. So basically, Jimbo Fisher, the head coach, said, all right, our very last game of the season against LSU, we're going to play like it's our bowl game. And he gave Achane the ball, I believe it was like 37 times, as a 188-pound running back in that game, and just pounded him. And Achane won that and more. I mean, he, for a small back, he runs with impressive power, definitely great toughness. And again, his stop-start ability, his straight line speed, his ability to break free and create big plays, I think obviously Seattle already has a back like that in Ken Walker. But at the same time, I think that if something were to happen to Walker, Seattle does not have a starting caliber back, in my opinion. With all due respect, DJ Dallas, good player, but I don't think that he is the difference maker that Walker is. I think that Achane gives you that kind of a big play threat that might be able to complement that in case you do have any type of issue where you want to, or you just want to limit the amount of punishment that Walker gets over the course of the season.
Achane's got the track background. So does Chase Brown. Coming from Illinois, over 1,600 rushing yards for the Illini last year in the rugged Big Ten. Another player that put up gaudy statistics. You can see the track speed when he is able to get to the second level and run by guys. He's slippery. And I think the thing that's maybe underrated in his game, he's another back that's around the 200-pound range. He's not a big guy. He actually built very similar to Travis Homer, but runs with more clout than what Travis Homer did. This is a guy that I call a middleweight. He's not going to truck guys, but he is going to surprise you with his ability to push the pile and create yardage after contact. He's a hard-nosed runner that just doesn't have the strength to necessarily be a bully, but he's going to surprise you. And the only issues I've seen in his game, he's had some issues fumbling the football. He had 5 fumbles last year. Pete Carroll is not going to stand for that. So he's got to get that cleaned up at the next level. His pass protection is very up and down. There are some good reps, though, that suggest to me that he can be a third down back. I like his effectiveness out of the backfield with somewhat limited opportunity. So Brown's another one of those guys that has been a bell cow at Illinois. He's racked up a ton of carries, and he's been extremely productive. A guy that can hit some home runs for you, can break some tackles, can make guys miss. Another really good day 2 value that I think would be a nice fit to go alongside Ken Walker III.
No, I 100% agree with you. And if you're looking for one of those tackle breakers instead of one of those big play threats, as I mentioned before with Achane, then I think that you just got to look at Abanaconda from Pitt, or a back that, a lot of Pac-12 fans here locally are going to know very, very well, and Zach Charbonnet from UCLA. Charbonnet is a legitimate, 6 foot, 225 pound, just beast. I mean, he is one of the guys that has the best combination of power power, lateral agility, balance through contact, and he is the full package. And so to me, if you're looking for someone who can play a little bit more of that, I don't want to say Rashad Penny, because Charbonnet does not have that type of breakaway speed, although it is good, but a little bit more of that big back with some thump to him to complement Ken Walker's big playability, then I think that Charbonnet makes an awful lot of sense in the second round. And finally, if we're going to switch over here to our day three, or excuse me, our tier three kind of backs, a couple of guys that I wanted to mention just here really quickly would be Chris Rodriguez Jr. from Kentucky. Certainly is one guy that I just absolutely love his style of play, and really Muhammad Ibrahim from Minnesota as well, because they're both just short, stocky, physical backs that just punish you. I mean, they are going to hit the linebackers as hard as linebackers hit running backs, and that just kind of sounds silly, but that's really what you're looking for, is the backs who create contact rather than run away from it. And I think neither one of these guys has the great speed, although Rodriguez ran better in his pro day than I thought he would. I think he came in at 4.49 seconds. He looks more like a mid 4.5s back to me. I think that both these guys are going to be available in day three. Both of them have been highly, highly successful against elite competition for an awful long time. And they are just those guys. We talked about this earlier. Part of the reasons why you do those private interviews and things like that is you really want to see who these people are as men. Do they have the heart of champions? You don't have to do interviews with Chris Rodriguez and with Muhammad Ibrahim. I mean, you can just see that with what they show on the field, that they play like champions. And that's why I think that they would make some sense for Seattle.
My two day three gems couldn't be any different in terms of size and playing style, but I got to start with Deuce Vaughn. Maurice Jones-Drew was pocket Hercules. This guy is pocket Hulk. 5'5", 179 pounds. I mean, so he's extremely short, but he's kind of got a little bit of a stocky build. So I think a lot of people, they look at the 179 and are like, oh, way too light, but he is short and stocky. And that really works to his advantage because he gets lost behind the offensive line and then he's gone. He's a blur. Just ask Alabama, who gave up a 60-plus yard touchdown run to him in their bowl game. This guy is electric. He didn't run the 40 at the combine, but this guy looks like he has legitimate 4.4, maybe even high 4.3 speed. When you watch the film, he is a jitterbug and he will smack you. This guy is not afraid of contact. Again, he's small, but he's short and compact, and he dishes some punishment. He will surprise you. He'll come up and he'll stymie a blitz and pass protection. He's very inconsistent in that regard, but it's not because of effort. This guy plays hard in pass protection. He's an outstanding receiver as well. So this guy would check off that third down back guy for the Seahawks, while also offering some special teams ability. He might be your kick returner. They've had success with Kansas State guys coming in and returning kicks and punts for them in the past. And then the other running back I quickly want to mention, Dwayne Trainwreck McBride from UAB. And he really is a train wreck. This guy loves collisions, led all of the country last year, 4.6 yards per carry after contact for an entire season, over 4.5 yards. He's 210 pounds. He actually reminds me a lot of former Seahawk Thomas Rawls. He's kind of got a little bit of an Energizer bunny to him, that he'll truck guys. He can make guys miss in space. He's got some shiftiness that you wouldn't expect. We haven't seen him run the 40 because he's had a hamstring injury he's been dealing with, but this guy is probably a 4.4, low 4.5s with the 210-pound frame, and he fits what the Seahawks love to do. He hasn't had opportunities to catch the football, and his pass protection has been hit and miss. Might not be a third down back. That limits his overall value, but as a day three selection, this guy screams Seahawks with the way that he runs the football, and he would give them that short yardage between the tackles complement to go with Ken Walker III. So certainly he's a player that I would love to see in a Seahawks uniform.
No, I really would too. I mean, you took two of my absolute favorite backs in this class, and Tyjae Spears, and again McBride. And I'll be honest with you. I'll kind of give this quick secret away to all of those Locked On Seahawks YouTube followers and listeners. On my rankings, top 10 running backs for foxsports.com, I wanted to put McBride and Tyjae Spears on there. I only had one spot remaining. and I had to put the other back that you mentioned, Deuce Vaughn, because again, talk about just players that just pop off the tape and that you want to link your name to. I mentioned before, I kind of winked in the camera when I saw what I thought Russell Wilson could be in the NFL. I want to link in the camera right now with Deuce Vaughn, because the guy is an absolute superstar. He's going to be Darren Sproles part 2 in the NFL. And by that, I mean a constant or a consistent Pro Bowl caliber player in the returning game as well as a running back. So I love that you mentioned the backs that you did, because one of the guys we talked about today, Corbin, is absolutely going to be a Seahawk. I wouldn't be surprised if 2 of them are, because this running back class is stacked and the Seahawks have huge needs. And I think that combination is going to equate to all kinds of fun at the running back room for running back aficionados like you and me, sir.
Yeah, this could definitely be a draft where the Seahawks double dip with the needs that they have at the position and just the depth and talent and just the versatility with these ball carriers that are in this draft class. Should be a lot of fun. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and other major podcast platforms for free to make sure you don't miss any of our episodes. Coming up on our Thursday episode, we'll continue our roster reset by checking out Seattle's offensive depth chart and where things stand with less than 3 weeks until the 2023 NFL Draft. We hope to see you then. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.